Let's start. First talk is adaptively secure three-round threshold Schnorr from GTH by Renat Bachos, Orab Das, Julian Loss, Ling Ren from CISPA Helmholtz Center and the University of Illinois, and Soraf will give a talk.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. I recently graduated with UIUC, working with Professor Ling Ren, and I'm currently at Category Labs. This is a joint work with Renas, Julian, and my advisor, Ling. So this talk will be about designing adaptively secure threshold signature scheme with 3 rounds. So I'll build up the basic and we'll talk about some of the techniques. So let's start with Schnorr signatures. So very classic signatures where the key generation is as follows. The signer samples a random secret from a large field, which will be the secret key, and the public key is z raised to s for some generator g. And to sign a message, the signer will first sample a random nonce, small a here, commit to this random nonce using a discrete log commitment g to the a, then derives a random oracle-based challenge, which is c, and then outputs the masked version of the secret key, which is denoted here as a plus c times s. And the signature also contains the nonce commitment. So this is the signature, and to verify, the verifier will rederive the random challenge, which is c prime, and then we'll check whether the second component of the signature is a valid linear equation in the exponent. So that's how the verification works. This is a very simple scheme. Some really nice properties, for example, we can prove the security of the scheme assuming just the hardness of discrete logarithm in the random oracle model. And it also has fast verification, it's pairing free, it's compatible with the NIST at DSA construction. And also this has gotten popular because many blockchains are also adopting this, supporting Schnorr verification. So in this talk is about threshold Schnorr signature. So which is naturally, that it's a multi-party computation protocol where we have multiple parties. Now each of them hold a signing key. So here I'm denoting S1 to S5 will be their individual signing keys, and they collectively want to sign a message. And these signing keys are n, t shares of some random secret S that nobody knows. And public key will be g raised to S as before. And we also additionally output threshold public keys, which is g raised to individual signing keys. And again, this parties now collectively is supposed to compute the threshold Schnorr signature scheme, which should look like the traditional Schnorr signatures. We have a random challenge that the party derives, which is based on the random nonce that they somehow collectively sample. And the verifier, well, again, we want the verifier to be compatible with the non-threshold version of the Schnorr. So this is the threshold Schnorr signature scheme. And the security guarantee we get is that the signature scheme is unforgeable as long as adversary corrupts less than t parties. And this talk is about doing security proof, which is the adaptive security proof. So we need to formalize the security guarantees a bit more. So how do we do it? So we formalize it using a security game, and the game usually works as follows. So we have a challenger on the left and an adversary on the right. And they'll play a game where the challenger will give oracle access to the adversary for some useful oracles. For example, the oracle can be the key generation oracle, which the adversary will query to get the public key and the threshold public key. The challenger also needs to give oracle access to the corruption oracle, which the adversary can query with the party index I, and will get back the internal state of the party, which will be here just the secret key. We also need to give the signing oracle access, which the adversary can query to get a signature on a message. And after doing all this interaction many times, the adversary will output a forgery. And we say that the adversary wins if it did not query on this message before and it corrupts less than t parties before outputting this forgery. And what we talked about in the static versus adaptive corruption is when does this adversary queries this corruption oracle? More formally, in a static adversarial setting, we make this restriction on the adversary that it needs to decide who it will corrupt before the protocol begins. Let's say we have an n-party protocol, then we first require the adversary to, in its head, decide who it will corrupt, and only then we can run the protocol. And when we say a protocol is secure in the static adversary model, this is the restriction we're putting on the adversary. Alternatively, we have this more realistic adaptive corruption, where we don't restrict anything, don't restrict the timing of corruption on the adversary. And by timing, I mean timing of decision on who to corrupt. So if we have an N-party protocol, the adversary might first decide to corrupt party 3 and let the protocol run for a while and see how things are going, and then later decide to corrupt additional parties based on the protocol state. And naturally, this is the more realistic network model, and that's what we want to study. And in this paper, we give an adaptively secure threshold Schnorr signature scheme from DDH assumption, which has only 3 rounds. So this problem of studying threshold Schnorr has gotten a lot of recent attention, primarily due to NIST's requirement of adaptive security. And here I'll just show a subset of this construction, which are based on standard assumption. We'll see a few, in one of the later talk, we'll see some newer developments on if we are willing to make slightly more assumption, we can get newer schemes with newer properties. And this is the state of affairs. So we know how to design adaptively secure threshold Schnorr, which takes 5 rounds, and whose security is based on DDH assumption in the random molecule model. In the static security setting, we can design a protocol just takes only 3 rounds, assuming standard assumption. We also have 2-round protocol, but we'll hear about them later in one of the later talks. So in this paper, we try to close this gap. So we give a 3-round protocol that is adaptively secure and only assumes DDH in the random molecule model. So that's the main result. And we'll see how we get to this result at a high level. So let's look at how existing threshold signature scheme, threshold Schnorr works. It's a very classic approach to do it, which is the commit reveal approach. So let's look at only 2 parties, party 1 and party 2, with the respective signing keys S1 and S2. To sign a message, the first step is to locally sample a nonce. Each party individually locally samples a nonce. Party 1 samples a nonce small a1, computes the discrete log commitment to it, and then also computes the hash commitment to it, which I denote here using mu. Party 2 will also locally sample another randomness small a2, and will also compute the hash commitment mu2, and then they exchange. So this is the hash commitment phase. And after they're done with that, they reveal the discrete log commitment. So this is the commitment reveal phase where parties will reveal their respective commitments. And once they're done, they locally derive a combined nonce, which is the product of the individual discrete log commitments, and also locally derive a challenge. This is very similar to how standard non-threshold Schnorr work. It's just a 2-party setting. And finally, they derive the partial signatures, which is a masked nonce, which is a masked reveal of their individual signing keys. So last step of the protocol is revealing the partial signatures, and using these partial signatures, one can easily derive the final signature, which is just the sum of the individual partial signatures. And the verification also works like as in the standard non-threshold verifier. So I don't do the math, but everything works out. So this is how the current statically secure 3-round Schnorr signatures work. So to get adaptive security, in one of our previous paper, we designed this 5-round adaptively secure scheme with a DDH, and this is how it roughly works. So we take the 3-round scheme, and to get the security proof, we had to introduce 2 additional rounds, one at the beginning and one at the 3rd round. And there are very specific reasons why we had to do that. And before that, we also had to briefly change the secret key structure. Now the secret key will be a tuple where parties additionally hold secret shares of 0. And that's needed for the security proof. And once they have this additional keys, this is how this 5-round scheme works. At the beginning, we additionally introduce a random bit sampling round where every party locally samples some random bit and gossips it with, sends it to everybody else. Party 1 will sample x1, random bit string x1, and will send it to others. Party 2 will also do that, and so on. So this is the first round of interaction they need to do. And now let's define this vector x, which is concatenation of this bit string that the parties have sampled. So then we take this random input x, and then feed this to the nonce commitment phase. So we take this x, and we somehow need to reveal a masked version of the discrete log commitment. This is all for the security proof. This is the additional change we introduce. And another change we need to introduce is this view change, a view exchange, where parties have to gossip after they are done with the first 2 rounds. They have to exchange that everybody has the consistent view. Adversary did not do an attack where it sent different messages to different parties. So that's what they do. Each party locally computes some hashes of their local view and exchanges, and that is kind of crucial. So these are the 2 additional rounds that the our previous construction introduces on top of the standard 3-round Schnorr protocol that we have seen. So in this paper, our whole goal is to kind of remove these 2 rounds, and we'll briefly see how we do it. Okay, let's look at our approach. So we take a hard look at this 5-round scheme, and then if we look at the first 2 rounds, what we see that the proof requires that for every signing session, this input x to this function f, which is a random oracle, needs to be unique for every signing session. And this is probably one of the easiest way to get a unique value. It just exchange some random bit string. In this paper, what we also observed that parties already exchanged some kind of random bit string in the second round of the protocol, which is the hash commitment here. So what we try to do is we will use this vector mu, which is the commitment of the hash commit, which is the concatenation of the hash commitment that they use to derive this unique input that we need for the security proof to go through. And that's what we do. So at a very high level, these are not the details. This doesn't have all the details. Our protocol, first 2 rounds of our protocol works as follows. So it's similar to a standard Schnorr. Each party samples a random nonce, computes the discrete log commitment, which is G to the AI, and also computes the hash commitment and exchanges them with each other. And then parties derive this concatenated vector mu, and then derives the masked nonce G to the AI times f times this mu I, where this is the unique value that we'll get in each signing session. And then they publish this result. But additionally, they also have to produce a proof that parties are using the same identical small AI in both the hash commitment here and also in this masked nonce. Okay, so this is very crucial for proof. You can, and then they exchange this reveal nonce and along with the proof. And party 2 also does that. Now you may say that, well, we can simply use a generic snark for this proof, but that will be very expensive. And to get rid of that expense, we somehow carefully modify how we'll compute this discrete log commitment, and also how we reveal everything, so that at the end we can just work with a very standard, very efficient Sigma protocol. If you're interested, please look at our paper. So there are some tricky details on how we get avoid using generic snark. So to summarize, we somehow in this paper, first, to remove a round, we merge the hash commitment phase with the unique session identifier that we need for the security proof to go through. Okay, so this gives us from 5-round to 4-round. And now I'll briefly say, like, kind of only in one slide, how we remove this view consistency check. So recall that these are the first 2 rounds of our protocol. But if I look at our previous protocol, Glacius, it has this additional step where parties need to exchange the views so that they can make sure that everybody has a consistent view. And again, this is purely an artifact of the security proof, where this reduction did not know how to simulate the view of the adversary if adversary does this attack where it sends different messages to the different parties. So in this paper, to address this issue, we look at this notion of equivalence class. It's a proof technique from this Twinkle paper, and also add some additional techniques to address this issue without exchanging the view. So that's all I'll talk about in terms of techniques. So in summary, our final protocol has a very similar to the standard 3-round commit reveal threshold star structure. The secret key has an additional or 2 additional elements in the actual protocol. We have the hash commitment round, and then we have the hash like a nonce opening round, along with this additional Sigma protocol proof that the parties have to reveal. And finally, we have the normal partial signature exchange round. Okay, so this is pretty much the construction. And in summary, we give a 3-round threshold Schnorr with adaptive security based on harness of decisional Diffie-Hellman assumption. And that's all.
We have time for questions. Thank you so much for the talk.
Hey, cool work. Can you talk a little bit about this Sigma protocol-friendly commitment function used to compute mu and what you used? And
Okay.
yeah.
Good. I don't have slides for it, but so how we do it is, so instead of just committing to G raised to AI in the hash commitment, we commit to a masked version of G raised to AI inside the hash commitment. Okay, with a different mask, which is just which doesn't have to be a common randomness, which is kind of a local randomness. Everybody samples a local randomness and hash commits to a masked version of G to the AI, and then they later reveal a different masked version of G to the AI. And then it turns out that since both of them are like a just mask commitment of G to the AI, what you need to do is show equality of discrete log between two mask commitment of AI.
So just to clarify, this pi1 proof argues that A1 in mu1 is the same A1 in capital A1, right?
So if you have a different function, let's say G, so what part is commute, or let's say M, what part is commit to is G to the A1 times M of local randomness rho I. And then in this step, they reveal whatever they commit inside the hash. So we can take the hash value directly without using any proof. And they also prove that input of this hash function has some same relation as this value that they come output. I can talk offline, but yeah.
Thanks.
It's a bit tricky.
Is there, am I wrong? Are there no two-round threshold Schnorrs?
There are two-round threshold Schnorr. In the static security setting, we still rely on OMDL with AGM.
Yes, okay. So you just, on that slide, you only had standard.
Standard emission.
No.
We'll hear about
Okay.
newer advances on two-round, I think, in the third talk of this session. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so let's thank the speaker again. We have next talk is unmasking T raccoon, a lattice-based threshold signature with an efficient identifiable abort, and it's by Rafael De Pino, Suichi Katsamuta, William Nyot, Michel Reichle, and Kaoru Takamura, and Kaoru will keep a talk.
This is for that match. Yeah. So, no. Okay. Thank you for introduction, and I'm Kaoru at PQShoot. I'm going to talk about identifiable protocol for recent lattice-based threshold signature scheme, threshold raccoon, T raccoon. This work is joint work with Rafael, Shu, Guillaume, and Michael. Okay. First, let me explain our main contribution. Our main contribution is identifiable protocol for T raccoon. Then our identifiable protocol is a single add-on protocol to the original protocol. So the signing protocol does not change. And communication cost is during IA protocol is 60 plus 6.40 kilobyte per one signers, where T is a threshold. We have two side contributions. The first one is we provide fast game-based definition of the threshold signature with interactive IA protocol. And second one is we provide the fast formal security analysis of the variant of Labrador with zero knowledge. Now I move to the background. Here I explain what threshold signature is. This is a distributed signature schemes. in the key generation phase, the signing key SK is distributed to n signers so that T or more key shares reconstruct actual SK, and no signer knows actual SK, and less than T key shares leaks no information about the SK. In this work, we assume the trusted party in key generation phase. And to sign on a message M, first one decide set SS of signing signers participating in the signing protocol. The signers in SS execute the signing protocol and eventually obtain the signature. Now I review some lattice-based social signature schemes. Several schemes have been proposed before 2024, but these schemes use habits such as generic MPC, free homomorphic encryption, and homomorphic trapdoor commitment. Recently, some schemes without relying on such habits have been proposed. In particular, T-Raccoon is the first such schemes. First schemes. The signing protocol consists of 3-round communication, and this scheme achieves efficient signature size compared with early schemes. As one drawback, Social Raccoon does not achieve availability. Namely, malicious signer can arbitrarily cause the signing protocol to fail. As a countermeasure against such attacks, we can consider a property so-called identifier vault. This property guarantees that when the signing protocol fails, then honest signers identify malicious misbehaving signers. Specifically, after terminate the signing protocol, signers obtain a signature or a valid signature or a set of misbehaviors. For communication channel, identifier vault requires a synchronous channel because honest signers have to distinguish two cases. A signer is honest but slow, or a signer is really malicious. In this work, we assume the synchronous authenticated broadcast channel. And the goal of this work is to construct an efficient IA protocol for Social Raccoon. Before I explain our IA protocol, I recall the construction of Social Raccoon. Social Raccoon is a lattice-based variant of the well-known 3-round DL-based social signature scheme SPARKLE. The key is a LWE type key. So verification key consists of the random matrix A and vector T computed from short vectors S and E. And secret key shares include secret share of short vector S and pairwise C. This pairwise C is a unique component in Social Raccoon. In the first round of the signing protocol, each signer generates commitment WI and broadcasts hash commitment of WI. In the next round, signer opens the commitment. In the final round, signer first checks the validity of hash commitment and compute aggregated commitment W, challenge value C, and partial response ZI. Then The important different point from Sparkle is this masking term. These terms are additive secret share of 0. The vector M is deterministically computed from pairwise seed and protocol messages. So protocol messages so far. And yeah, and this is a crucial component to prevent lattice-specific attack in the threshold signatures context. Looking ahead, this masking time is main obstacle to construct efficient IA protocol. Now I move to explaining our approach. If we use NISC, then it is easy to construct identifiable protocol. Specifically, all signers prove that they honestly executed signing protocol for each round. So each signer output the protocol message and proofs. Then a signer checks the validity of commitment, validity of proofs, and if all proofs are valid, then move to next round. But these attached proofs includes the communication cost during signing protocol. So to avoid this inefficiency, we can consider the default IA protocol. Specifically, signers execute signing protocol normally. Then, if they obtain a valid signature, then they do nothing anymore. But if the signing protocol aborts, then they move to IA protocol and eventually obtain a set of misbehaviors. Then we can preserve the original signing protocol, so communication and computation cost during signing protocol does not change, and does not change if signing protocol succeeds. For definition, there are some game-based definition of threshold signature with IA protocol. However, existing definition captures only non-interactive IA protocol because most of classical secure threshold signature scheme achieve a special type of IA protocol, so-called partial verification. This property allows us to check the validity of partial signature without any communication. However, for threshold raccoon, the masking techniques prevent partial verification, so it is hard to avoid interactive IA protocol in our context. So we formalize a game-based definition of threshold signature with interactive IA protocol. From now, I talk about our approach. Our IA protocol follows the approach using NISC. Specifically, signers have to prove this relation within the NISC. But notice that the first three condition is algebraic, but the last condition is non-algebraic. So proving mixed relation like this is impractical. So if we use a NISC proving this relation, then resulting protocol become inefficient. So we want to avoid proving this mixed relation. Okay. Then, so now I want to explain why we need last relation. This relation is to ensure that masking terms are cancelled canceled out by aggregating partial responses. In other words, this is to ensure that each pair of signers use the same masks. Then the the important of our observation here is as long as each pair use the same mask M, even though it is not honestly generated via random walk, then the masking terms should be cancelled out. So this means that we don't need to care whether the vector M is honestly generated from pairwise seed via random walk. So our idea is to ensure this star condition outside of the NISC. To ensure this condition, we consider the protocol like this. Here we use a lattice space commitment scheme. In the first one, each signer generates a commitment of vector M, where small delta is commitment randomness deterministically computed from pairwise seed and protocol message so far. So this commitment deterministically generated, and important point is honest pair output the same commitment. In the next round, if signer received inconsistent commitment, then it revealed pairwise seed corresponding to inconsistent commitment. And finally, signers checks whether the commitment D is honestly generated, and reveals if the revealed seed is valid via hash commitment of pairwise seed, which is generated in key generation phase. Then, thanks to the binding of commitment schemes, we can ensure that each pair uses the same commitment. But here we have to carefully analyze the security, because pairwise seed is sensitive information which should be hidden from adversary. But fortunately, redundancy in our protocol does not harm the security, because pairwise seed for honest pairs are not revealed, because if signers follow the protocol, then they output the same commitment. But and adversary already knows adversary can know the pairwise seed involving the cooperative server, cooperative signers in the initial phase of security game. So redundancy is not issue in our protocol. So eventually, the signers have to prove this condition within the NISC. Then the final condition is commitment is honestly. The final relation means the commitment is honestly generated. Then all condition is algebraic. So in our protocol, we use a lattice-based ZK snacks combining L and P plus Labrador, which is sketched in previous works. In the security analysis, we formally analyze security of this approach in a modular manner. For more details, please see our full version paper. For efficiency, because our IA protocol is simple add-on to the original scheme. So the cost during signing a protocol does not change. And communication cost during IA protocol is 16 plus 6.4 times T kilobyte per one signers. Finally, I talk about future work and concurrent works. Other future works, first one is to check whether our techniques works for related lattice space scheme using same masking techniques. And the second one is to construct distributed key generation for our schemes. And as independent and concurrent works, recently Rafael et al. Proposed other IA protocol for a variant of lattice space, a variant of session raccoon. They use very different techniques and different and very interesting techniques. So if you interesting, please check this paper. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. We have time for questions. There's, I have a question, maybe a naive one. Does your approach not work for any threshold signature? So you can add identifiable abort by zero knowledge proofs after the fact?
This approach should work for every session signature, I think. But I'm not sure that resulting IA protocol is efficient because NISC should be efficient.
Right. And why are you using snarks? Because that makes sense for big number of players, right?
Yeah.
Like if you only had 3 players, would it make sense to use snarks or no?
So that point. So I'm not sure that's the point. Yes. So yeah, let's discuss after the talk. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So the next talk, is it a combined? So Elizabeth, this is a combined talk, right? And you will be the only speaker or?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Can I click?
Very good.
Can I click?
So next session is slightly longer. And there will be 2 papers, plausible attack on adaptive security of threshold Schnorr and on the adaptive security of Frost.
Trap is that this is.
There's a common author, Elizabeth Kreitz, on both papers. The first one, co-author is Alistair Stewart. The second is Jonathan Katz, Chelsea Comlo, Stefano Tesaro, Chenji Zhu, and Elizabeth will talk about both papers right now.
Okay, so I'll be presenting 2 papers, and the first that I'll talk about is a plausible attack on adaptive security of threshold Schnorr signatures, which is joint work with Alistair Stewart. So Saurav and others have given background on threshold signatures in prior talks, but we'll just recap some basics. So a threshold signature allows some set of parties. We're going to say the threshold here is T+1, so not T like you might sometimes see. So T+1 out of n parties are required to jointly produce a signature. And in this example, 2 out of 3 parties are required to sign. Now, the parties share some portion of the key, and there's an overall public key PK. Now, the key can be shared either via like trusted key generation or a distributed key generation protocol. A lot of this work, not just these papers, but a lot of this work in this session is motivated by an upcoming call from NIST for multi-party threshold schemes. So there was an initial public draft that came out in 2023, and now an updated draft just this year. And we expect the official call to come maybe sometime at the end of 2025. So looking at submissions for 2026. And we'll just recap single-party Schnorr signatures in case some of you weren't here in the prior sessions. So for a single-party Schnorr signature, the signer first samples a secret key from some field, and their public key is some generator raised to the secret key. Now, in the context of Schnorr signatures, really this should be additive notation, not multiplicative, because it's an elliptic curve group. But anyway, this is just a simpler presentation. And in order to sign a message M, the signer first samples a random nonce R, and then computes a commitment capital R, which is the generator raised to secret value R. Then they compute the hash, which is the challenge C in the Schnorr identification protocol. So this hash takes as input the public key, the message, and the nonce commitment. And then they form their value Z, which is R plus the hash times the secret key. And overall, the signature consists of this nonce commitment R and value Z. Now, the verifier computes the same hash and then checks the verification equation. So the commitment R times the public key raised to this hash C and checks it against G to the Z. And Schnorr signatures are unforgeable in the random oracle model under discrete log, also unforgeable in the AGM under discrete log in a tight security reduction. And tomorrow morning, we have a session which will show that Schnorr is tightly secure under a new variant of discrete log. So threshold Schnorr signatures basically consist of a set of parties holding a share of the key, and then there's some interaction, and at the end, they produce an overall signature RZ. And this final signature must verify exactly like single-party Schnorr under the overall public key. So some of you may remember in recent years, there was a long line of work on ROS attacks. And I'm going to make some connections with some of the work here with ROS attacks, highlighting both some similarities and some important differences. So the ROS problem was first stated in Schnorr's original paper. And the ROS attacks have affected a number of threshold, blind, and multi-signature schemes, including those that are compatible with Schnorr verification. Now, ROS attacks fundamentally rely on concurrency. So they exploit the fact that an adversary can open multiple signing sessions at once and potentially leverage this additional capability to forge. And again, there's been a long line of works on ROS attacks. The very recent one shows a polynomial time attack for roughly 180 concurrent sessions. And ROS attacks fundamentally kind of rely on a type of birthday problem. So in this work, we show an attack where a forgery amounts to a linear combination of public values. So this is very similar to a ROS type attack in that respect. However, uniquely, our attack allows a forgery based on public key shares alone. So it doesn't require even one partial signature. And unlike ROS attacks, our attack doesn't rely on concurrency. So it works even for a single signing session. So in this work, we define a search problem P and show a concrete, efficient attack if P is easy to solve. And the problem P is as follows. So given some vector W, which is a vector of field elements, and a set of vectors V1 through Vn, it asks to find a set CS in the set from 1 to n with size Tc such that W is in the span of the vectors Vi, if it exists. So here in the context of threshold signatures, the threshold is T plus 1, n is the number of parties, CS is the corruption set, and Tc is the maximum allowed corruption threshold. Now, you'll notice that similar to the ROS problem, P doesn't rely on group elements or operations and just relies on field elements alone. But unlike RAS, P is also not stated in terms of a random oracle. Now, RAS relies on concurrency, but our attack fundamentally relies on adaptive security. So this is not an attack against static security. And adaptive security says that an adversary should not be able to forge a signature even when they have the added capability to corrupt parties as the protocol progresses. So this is in contrast to static security, where there's some set of corrupt parties at the onset before even keygen. And in the NIST call, they emphasize a strong preference for schemes that achieve provable adaptive security. And just to give a quote, given the possibility of adaptive corruptions in the real world, it is important to consider for any proposed threshold signature scheme whether the major safety properties of interest, such as enforgeability, are safeguarded against such an adversary. So there can sometimes be an assumption in the community that a scheme that's proven statically secure might also be adaptively secure. But what we explore in this work is whether or not that statement is actually true. And of particular interest is full adaptive security, which is the analog of static security. So this allows full T corruptions out of a threshold of T+1 parties. So our attack applies to schemes that satisfy the following three properties. The first is that the public key shares must be public. What typically happens is a DKG is run and the public keys are revealed that way. But I want to emphasize that you may have a DKG or some other key generation mechanism that hides the keys, but they may be exposed anyway through signing. So a lot of the schemes I'll talk about here, Frost, for example, could reveal the public keys anyway through partial signatures. The second property is that the keys must lie on a polynomial. So each public key share is given relative to a polynomial f, and f is evaluated at the party identifiers, so 1 through n. It doesn't matter what the party identifiers are. They don't need to be integers. They can be other strings, but just for simplicity, we'll consider this. So of course, you'll recognize this as a very standard way to generate keys for Schnorr signatures. So Shamir's secret sharing has this structure, and basically every discrete log-based DKG, Pedersen, Gennaro et al., et cetera. And the final requirement is that the overall signature that's generated must be compatible with Schnorr verification. So here's a list of schemes that satisfy the three conditions. So we see all variants of Frost, all variants of Sparkle, Lindell. We also see some deterministic schemes. So these are like EDDSA compatible, but again, EDDSA is not verifiably deterministic. So Schnorr verification and EDDSA are the same. So our results also apply here. I also want to highlight some of the robust schemes, Rose, Sprint, Hearts, et cetera. This is particularly relevant because, as we'll see, the attack has some special properties very close to full corruption for large numbers of parties. And so the robust schemes are the ones that are designed to have the guaranteed output delivery even with large numbers of parties. Also mentioned some schemes that don't have this structure. So some of the ones that we've seen today, people talked about Glacius, Gargos, this new work, Frost Mass, Crackle and Snap, et cetera, and also non-Schnorr schemes. And I just want to point out there's a related work that we have which gives a classification of these schemes and some understanding of why the properties of these schemes actually get around this attack. And we also provide a series of impossibility results, which uniquely also only rely on public key shares. So it's a very interesting property. Okay, so let's now take a look at how the attack works. So the adversary needs to produce a forged signature, and that forged signature will consist of a nonce R star and a value Z star. So what the adversary does is it basically just forms a random linear combination of the public key shares. So it samples some random vector alpha and then computes R star as a linear combination of the overall public key PK as well as the other public key shares PK1 through PKN. We'll recall that a valid forgery has to satisfy Schnorr verification, so we know that R star times PK to the C star equals g to the z star. So if we add this to the equation above, we get the following equation, which looks basically the same, except for pk has this additional c star term. And we'll also recall that the structure of the secret keys is such that they are evaluations of a polynomial. So here we have a polynomial f and coefficients a0 through at. And you can think of this as kind of like a dot product of the coefficients with these van der Waals vectors. So these are special vectors that have the form 1 and I squared, et cetera, up to it. So these are, again, the i's are the participant identifiers. And then the adversary will compute this vector w. So this is c star times the first van der Waals vector plus the linear combination of the other van der Waals vectors, where we have these random coefficients alpha I. And c star here for the forgery is the hash of the public key, the forged message, and this value r star is computed above. Now you notice that with Oracle access to the problem P, the adversary can obtain this corruption set CS that has size TC such that this W is in the span of these VIs. So once it obtains that set CS, then it can just simply corrupt that set of parties. And when it corrupts the parties, it obtains the secret keys. From this point, it can compute via some basic linear algebra some coefficients beta j such that the vector W equals this linear combination from before, but this equals a linear combination of these van der Waals vectors, but just within the corruption set CS. So you can kind of think of this like we started with the product of public keys, like n of them, and then this equals some random linear combination of just the corruption set sized set of public keys. So this allows you to just corrupt those parties, and then you basically just have a forgery that just falls out from these coefficients beta j times all of the secret keys. So this table gives the probability that our attack succeeds, with the values in the table here being x. So it's 2 to the minus x is the success probability. And we look at different values of n and t. So we consider kind of moderately sized sets, 43 out of 64, right up to 1,024. And this is important also because in the NIST call, they specify different corruption thresholds, numbers of parties, et cetera, and we're interested in what the security guarantees are for those different categories. Now you can see these values 0. This corresponds to an attack success of probability 1. But even for some of these lower values, it's still insecure if the problem P is easy. So for example, 2 to the minus 75, this is like the number of hashes that all the Bitcoin miners in the world can compute in about a minute. For these other values, like we're considering here P is 2 to the 252, so something like add 25519, 2 to the minus 126 is where you'd be better off just attacking discrete log. Okay, so the implications of our results. Our results have two striking implications. The first is that if P is easy to solve, then all of the schemes that I mentioned are statically secure but not adaptively secure. So this would show a fundamental separation between static and adaptive security for these schemes for natural protocols, which is a long-standing open problem. There are, of course, like concocted protocols where you can give a separation. Moreover, it would not only just apply to a single natural scheme, but would actually apply to the entire range of schemes that I presented earlier. And it would hold even in the strongest idealized models like the AGM and even the GGM. And this is again because the problem P isn't defined in terms of group operations. Moreover, even if P turns out to be hard, ultimately our results show that the full adaptive security of these schemes cannot be proven without an assumption that implies the hardness of some instances of this problem. So in particular, if a scheme is fully adaptively secure, this must mean that the problem P is not solvable in polynomial time. Now I say an assumption, for the rest of this talk, we can just assume that this is a new assumption. There is a small caveat here that it could be implied, for example, by discrete log if it's shown to be NP hard. but then the problem would need to be NP hard plus the specific instance with the random alpha. So again, for the sake of this talk, just assume we need a new assumption. And again, this assumption would go beyond group operations, random oracles, since P is not defined in them. And moreover, not only does it hold just for full adaptive security, but extends to some lower values. So if we see here, we show that for values TC equals T, this corresponds to full adaptive security. And then we have some insecurity even for a few values just below T. So the title of this talk is a plausible attack, right? It's plausible because we don't know if the problem P is easy or not. And we have some preliminary analysis in the paper, but further analysis is needed. So this is kind of a call to action for the community to take a look at this problem, and maybe you can shed some more light on it. Okay, so now I will present on the adaptive security of Frost. And this is joint work with Jonathan Katz, Chelsea Comlow, Stefano Tesoro, and Chenzi Zhu. So Frost stands for Flexible Round Optimized Schnorr Threshold Signatures. It's a threshold Schnorr signature scheme that consists of 2 rounds. The first round is an offline preprocessing round, so it's independent of the message or the signing set, and then you have 1 online signing round. The static security of Frost has been shown in the ROM only under the algebraic 1 more discrete log assumption. So just to recall, the classical OMDL assumption is you're given a set of group elements, x0 to xt, and you have access to a discrete log oracle, which gives you the discrete log of a group element of your choice. So the adversary has t-time access to this oracle, but it must output 1 more discrete log. So t plus 1 discrete logs. And the algebraic 1 more discrete log assumption is a falsifiable variant of OMDL. So in particular, both assumptions are falsifiable in terms of verification, but for AOMDL, this discrete log oracle has a special structure, so it's not just giving arbitrary group elements. So this is what makes it falsifiable. Okay, so for the basic structure of threshold Schnorr signatures, when you look at this equation, you know that you need to share the secret key somehow. So this is your trusted key generation, or DKG. But you also need some way to share the overall nonce. So now we'll look at how Frost does this. So in order to sign a message M, a party PI first samples 2 nonces, Ri and Si, uniformly at random from a field, and then computes the nonce commitments Ri and Si. It then outputs these 2 nonces, and at this point, it can take as input the message and signing set. So it doesn't need to happen until round 2. In the first round, parties can just produce as many nonces as they want. In round 2, they compute the following. So they first compute a hash AI. So this is a hash that takes as input the party index I, the overall public key, the message, and the set of all nonce commitments that they have received from the other parties in the first round. Then they compute the overall aggregate nonce R. So this is a product of each value Ri times Si raised to the AI. I'll note here that you have to use 2 nonces because otherwise you could just cancel off this AI term. Then they compute the hash C, exactly as in standard single party Schnorr. And then they compute their partial signature value Zi. So this consists of the Ri plus the hash AI times Si plus the hash C times the Lagrange coefficient with respect to the signing set times their secret key. And then finally, they output their partial signature Zi. So then the parties can, combiner parties, so this can be an external party or maybe even one of the signers, they take as input all of the partial signatures Zi, and they simply sum them up. And the final signature consists of R and Z. And again, this verifies exactly like standard single party Schnorr. We also consider the optimizations Frost2 and Frost3. So Frost2 is a computational improvement on Frost. So it reduces the number of hashes required from T to 1. And FROST3 actually improves on FROST2 in terms of bandwidth. And in this work, we prove the adaptive security of all 3 variants. Frost is widely used in practice and is also undergoing some standardization efforts. So it recently became an RFC through the IRTF, and my co-authors and I will also be part of a team submitting Frost to the NIST call as well. So here are the main results of this work. We first proved the adaptive security of all 3 variants of Frost up to T/2 adaptive corruptions in the ROM only under AOMDL. And you'll note that these are the same assumptions that the static proof of Frost are under. We then prove that all 3 variants are secure up to a full T corruptions in the algebraic group model and the ROM under AOMDL and a new assumption we introduce in this work called LDVR, which stands for low dimensional vector representation. We then show the unconditional hardness of the LDVR problem for some interesting values above T/2. So now let's take a look at the LDVR problem. So this figure here defines the LDVR experiment. And to begin with, the adversary produces a k-bit prime p and some state. And then the adversary is given as input these van der Waals vectors. So v0 through vn, and these are 1j up to j to the t. So it takes as input the van der Waals vectors, and it's given as input, or it's given access to this oracle. And this oracle you can think of like a random oracle. So the adversary gives as input some vector alpha, and then is given back a random value c. And this random value will correspond to the hash for the Schnorr signature. So then it forms the vector w, and this consists of a linear combination of the van der Waals vectors with these coefficients alpha and the coefficient ci, which it gets from the oracle. So if we consider this vector w, the adversary wins if this particular w is in the span of the van der Waals vectors. So again, the challenge here for the adversary is really to find a vector alpha that it gives as input to the random oracle such that this vector w is in the span of the van der Waals vectors. And just to highlight some similarities with the problem P from the previous part of the talk, just to recall the problem P, you're given an arbitrary vector w and arbitrary vectors v1 through vn, and then you're asked to find a corruption set such that w is in the span. So what this means is if the problem P is easy for some parameters, t, tc, n, then LDVR will also be easy because you can simply take this vector w, plug it into the problem P oracle, and get back that corruption set. So essentially, if P is easy for certain parameters, LDVR will also be easy for those parameters. But the important thing to note here is that LDVR is defined as an assumption, and it's an assumption that we're using to prove the adaptive security of Frost. And we additionally show the unconditional hardness of LDVR. So again, we have a graph consisting of different sets of parties. So you have 32 out of 128, 64, then we go up to 256 parties, and then 1,024. And on the top part of the graph, we show the fraction of parties that are corrupted. So we go from T/2 is the far left-hand side, all the way up to full corruption T on the right-hand side. So 0.55 up to 1. We note that the LDVR problem becomes trivial actually at T/2. So LDVR is not a concern for proofs that are under T/2 corruptions. So for example, Sparkle is proven under AOMDL and ROM, and this does not affect that T/2 result. So the unconditional hardness, you'll notice, actually extends all the way up to full adaptive security for small numbers of parties. And then for larger numbers of parties, we still get unconditional hardness close to T/2 and for some values above. In the gray zone, we don't know. We don't know if our bound is tight. So it's possible that the unconditional hardness can extend, but we don't know. So for Frost, we consider the half adaptive proof. So this is up to T/2 corruptions. And this we're able to prove in the random oracle model under AOMDL alone. Again, these are the same assumptions that are proven for static Frost. And I won't really give an overview of the structure of this proof, but for those of you who are familiar, the structure is very similar to the static proof for Frost under AOMDL. And you might notice that the use of AOMDL is an interactive assumption. So it has that discrete log oracle. So this is exactly what allows you to kind of bridge the gap between the static and adaptive proof. You're able to use that oracle for the adaptive corruptions. But what I'd like to highlight more is how LDVR appears in the full adaptive security proof. So again, we prove all three variants of Frost for up to a full T adaptive corruptions in the algebraic group model and random oracle model under AOMDL and our new assumption LDVR. So the main idea of this proof is that the adversary will output some forgery, R star, Z star, and at some point it will query the random oracle for the value C star. So we'll query for this hash of the public key, the forged message, and the forged nonce R star. But because we're in the algebraic group model, the adversary will also output a representation of this value relative to all group elements that it's seen so far. So R star here is a linear combination of the generator G, PK, the other partial public keys, and these nonces RI, SI, which are for all of the parties when they're queried for sign-in queries. So in the first round, parties are outputting those nonces. So it will have seen some nonces. And the adversary will output these values delta, beta, gamma. So the question here is whether or not we can replace the term on the right-hand side with just the generator and the partial public keys. Because if we can, this looks a lot like the LDVR problem, right? We have R star equals product of public keys. So if we can get to this structure, then we end up having a reduction to LDVR. Now, if we don't get to this structure, then we have a reduction to AOMDL. And this is because the public keys are themselves functions of the AOMDL challenges, and the nonces R and S are also functions of the AOMDL challenges. So if you cannot replace these values, then you actually end up with a new linear relation between all the AOMDL challenges. Again, we do not know if the problem P or LDVR is easy or hard, beyond, of course, the unconditional bound that we've given. We also note that it may be possible for other schemes to be proven fully adaptively secure under variants of these assumptions. Perhaps it's LDVR, perhaps it's some variant. And if you're interested in looking more into the details, here are some links to the two papers. And finally, I would just like to mention that Klaus-Peter Schnorr recently passed away. And as a community, I think we're all grateful for his work and for inspiring basically decades of research in this area that's ongoing. Thank you.
We have time for maybe a short question, because
Thank you for the talk. Great work. Have you considered the case of a portion of static corruptions and then a portion of adaptive corruptions? How would that affect your characterization?
We haven't considered that. Is that of interest? You tell me.
No, just curious if essentially the static corruptions in your case you'd have to ignore them in your problem.
I mean, yeah, the static corruptions that are pre-keygen don't really matter. I mean, actually, in our definition, we just consider all corruptions happening immediately after keygen. So that's the only relationship with static that we consider.
Okay. I just a further comment. I think it might be interesting the case of implementations that consider the case of resharing.
Yeah.
They will be continuously generating new
Key refresh. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So key refresh could really help here, right? Because basically this polynomial is like a perfectly binding commitment to keys. That's what actually causes the problem.
Yeah.
So yeah, key refresh would definitely also help.
And do you have any recommendation for protocols that typically, for approaches that would be susceptible to this? Would you Do you have an intuition on approaches that would basically prevent this, for example, by not making public the public keys, or maybe making them like a Peterson commitment?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why I mentioned on the adaptive security of key unique threshold signatures, which is an entire paper about basically the perfectly binding property of the keys. And that's what causes the problem. We have a lot of impossibility results on it. The attack applies. So if you use something like a Pedersen commitment, like many of the schemes that I said weren't affected, it gets around it. But then you have the issue that you don't have identifiable abort unless you use a zero knowledge proof. So, I don't know if, schemes in practice would actually get away from G to the X as the keys, right, and use Pedersen commitments. I think it would be an interesting thing to explore, but ultimately that's kind of a fundamental change in protocol specification. Otherwise, again, if you're stuck with these perfectly binding keys, then the attack will apply.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
One more.
Thanks for the great talk. Do you think like adaptive security of Schnorr would imply the P problem? Like so the other way around?
Yeah, so if they are fully adaptively secured, this must imply that P is not solvable in polynomial time.
Oh yeah, right. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's thank the speaker again.
And there's one more talk. Uncompressing
sorry.
dilithium's public key by Paco Oliveira, Anderson Caleviera, Benoit Colliati, Louis Gubin, and Paco is going to give a talk.
Okay.
This is forward, that's backwards.
Forward and
That's
backward?
forward.
Okay. Can you help me to put it? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Paco Azevedo Oliveira, and today I will present you how it is possible to fully recover the public key of dilithium only using dilithium signature. And this is a joint work with Anderson Caleviera, Benoit Cogliati, and Louis Coupin. Okay, so the order of the presentation will be natural. First, I would say that the work we have done is in the context of side channel attacks. So as you may know, dilithium is a signature algorithm that has been recently standardized by the NIST. And it is recommended to compute a signature in most use cases. And therefore, it will be necessary to investigate the security of embedded implementation that will use dilithium, principally against side channel or fault attacks. And so even if our work is not directly a fault attack or a side channel attack against dilithium, it will be in this context that we ask such a question, and I will try to explain after why. Okay, so first I will explain in detail how dilithium works. So in dilithium, we work in the two following rings, okay? And the key generation is a simple RLWE instance. So Alice compute a public matrix A, and two small vectors of polynomials, S1 and S2. Then she will compute T, A times S1 plus S2. The public key will be the matrix A and the vector T, while the secret key will be the knowledge of the two small vectors of polynomials, S1 and S2. And in addition with these key pairs, dilithium will use algorithm to split integers in two using the classical Euclidean division. And so we will denote high bits of an integer, the quotient in the Euclidean division, and the low bits of this integer will be the remainder in the Euclidean division. And of course, I just defined these high bits and low bits functions for integer, but they can be trivially extended to polynomials or vectors of polynomials just by taking the high bits or low bits of each of the coefficients in a polynomial. So to generate a signature, Alice will start by drawing a random polynomials vector y. Then she will use the message and the high bits of AY to create a challenge. and will use a part of the secret key, S1, to provide a response to this challenge, Z. So Z verified the following relation, and it is a key relation in dilithium because it makes links between public parameters and private parameters. On the left, we have the public key, A and T, and the signature, C and Z. And on the right, we have the nonce and the other part of the secret key. So I won't enter into many details, but to ensure the security of the scheme, we have to rely on rejection sampling. And so we make sure that Z do not leak any secret key information. And in addition, we also imply this equation that will be used for verification. And so to verify a signature, Bob will receive first the signature, so C and Z. And then he will be able to recompute the high bits of AZ minus CT. And therefore, he will accept the signature if he can successfully recompute the challenge that Alice has given to him. And if the challenge if the vectors of polynomial Z verify the bond imposed during the signature generation. Okay, so actually, the dilithium scheme is a little bit more complicated than this because the public key is compressed. The vectors of polynomial T is not completely known to Bob. Bob only knows the I bits of this vector. And so T is split in two, T1 and T0, and T0 is placed in the secret key. So as it is, Bob can no longer recompute the I bits of AZ minus CT because he do not know T0. And this is why the authors of dilithium created this lemma and created two auxiliary algorithms, namely make int and use int, that will allow Bob to recompute the I bits of AZ minus CT, even if he do not know T0. And so in reality, in the key generation, the vector T is split in two, and T0 is placed in the secret key, while T1 is kept in the public key. At the signature time, Alice will add a hint vector to the signature using the make int function. And Bob, at verification time, will use this hint vector and the use hint function to recompute the I bits of AZ minus CT without knowing T0. And so the natural question we ask is, what is the status for this T0? Because formally, T0 is placed in the secret key, and therefore nobody knows it. But we know that it is a performance optimization, and also that the security proof considers it public. And this means that even if one succeeds to recover T0, the black box security of dilithium is not threatened. But the question we ask on why we should be concerned about the fact to retrieve T0 is for side channel attacks. Because if we look at in the theoretical paper around dilithium, we see that there is no known way to recover T0 from dilithium signatures or in any other ways. But on the side channel side, if we look at the side channel literature on attacks on dilithium, a lot of papers do not know if it is reasonable to suppose if T0 can be used for an attacker to mount attack against dilithium implementation. And so there is some paper that consider it that it cannot be expected to recover T0 in a side channel setting. Some paper that do both their attack, knowing or not T0, and even some paper that ask for a reassessment of the role of the compression key for the security of dilithium implementation. And so the question we want to solve is, can T0 be used in practice or not to attack dilithium implementations? So the answer to this question is yes, and I will try to explain the main ideas of how we manage to do such a complete key recovery. So the first main idea is to prove that each signatures of dilithium will provide inequalities on the coefficient of the secret T0. And so this is formally done by the following proposition that can look a little bit complicated. And so I will just explain the simple proof of this proposition. When Bob receives the hint vector, suppose that Bob knows that a coefficient of the hint vector is 0. This means that the value he can recompute, the high bits of AZ minus CT1, 2 to the power of D, were the same as the value that he cannot compute, that were the complete I bits of AZ minus CT. And so he knows that in some sense, the secret value minus CT0 was sufficiently close to the value he knows, the low bits of AZ minus CT1 to the power of D, because adding minus CT0 did not change the I bits value that he knows. And so this formally, if we write the equalities, give us an upper bound on the distance between minus CT0 and the low bits of AZ minus CT1 to the power of D. And so the ideas are the same to prove the two other cases. And so when we know that each dilithium signature provides an equation, we'll try first to do the naive method. We want to collect so many inequalities that we will have a system that admit only T0 as a solution. And then we can solve it using a linear programming method. The problem with this is that this idea don't work because the LP system we construct is too complicated. There is at least two big problems. The first problem is that there is far too many inequalities per signature, because even for dilithium 2, each signatures of dilithium will give at least around 2,000 inequations on T0. And so this results to an LP system that is way too huge to solve. And the second problem is that most of the inequalities we will collect are completely useless. For example, I show here 3 toy examples. I suppose that I know all the coefficients of T0 except the first two. And I collect 10, 50, and 100 inequalities. And these are the resulting spaces of solution that I obtain. And as we can see on this little example, most of the inequalities that are collected are not useful to describe the set of solutions. And I search T0 in this set of solutions. And another problem is that as the complexity of the linear programming solver depends polynomially on the number of inequations it receives, we cannot increase the number of inequations we send to him endlessly. And so we need a second idea. And as I just explained, the idea is the following. By collecting too many inequalities, we have a complex algebraic representation that doesn't fit the fact that we want to find a simple geometric object, which is simply a polytope with a few faces. And therefore, we need to find a way to filter the inequalities that are useful to describe the facets of our polytopes and to discard the useless inequalities. And so to do this, we will define custom definitions and prove some good properties. So for this slide only, I suppose that I know a radius C and a vector T0 tilde, such that my secret T0 is in the ball centered in T0 tilde and of radius C. And I will say that when I collect an inequation from a dilithium signatures, I will say that this equation is useful with respect to T0 tilde and C if it intersects non-trivially the ball that I already know. And so this definition is very natural and can be drawing like this. So here I have a useful inequation that adds knowledge to the previous knowledge that I had. And here this is a perfectly useless inequation. And so I won't detail the proof of this proposition, but in the paper we show that it is possible to efficiently compute if an inequation we receive is useful according to any T0 tilde or any radius C. And so once we have made this custom definition and we prove that it is possible to efficiently compute if an inequation is useful or not, this gives us a direct strategy to recover T0. And the strategy can be summed up as collect, guess, filter, and repeat. So what we will do is that I will collect only few inequations. I will obtain a small LP system that is easy to solve because I don't have that many inequations. And then I will try to approximate or provably compute a box that contains my first LP system. And then I discard all these inequalities and I collect inequalities again, but only filtering inequation that go through the box I have determined at the previous steps. And then what I do is that I obtain a small LP system again, I solve it, I obtain a point, and again, I try to fit a box that contains my polytope, and I will start again and again and again. And so what we do is that we construct, rather to solving one big LP problem, we construct sequences of small LP systems that will converge through the solutions. Okay, so now the two remaining questions are, how can we choose the radius sequence and the number of inequalities to be sure that our sequence of LP system will converge through the secret solution? So in the paper, we have proposed a theoretical algorithm that will converge in a finite number of steps, but this algorithm is unfortunately not usable in practice. And so we decided to do the experiment just using a heuristic. And so we decided to remain, we made just a standard guess for the radius and for the number of inequalities. We decided to remain conservative. So we decided to choose a radius that is divided by 2 at each step and a constant number of inequalities at 50,000. And so here I just displayed the table where I suppose that I know T0 just to show how the sequences of LP system will tend to my secret T0. And so we saw that the methodology is very effective. Here we managed to recover T0 in less than 200,000 signatures and in a half an hour calculation in a classical desktop computer. And so finally, it is important to say that our filtration technique is very important because without this filtration, since we know that each signature will give around 500 inequalities on each polynomials of T0, this means that it will be necessary to solve an LP problem of around 100 millions of inequalities in 256 variables. And this is a complicated problem even for modern solvers. So finally, to conclude, we show that it is possible to recover T0 from dilithium signatures with less than 500,000 signatures for all the security level. And so this has two important implications. First, it shows that using T0 in attacks is a sound assumption. And secondly, it shows that papers that use T0 for attack are realistic and implementation must be protected against this type of attacks. And finally, at least it is something that is important for us. The code of the attack is publicly available, and so you can try to optimize it yourself or use it for your own implementation if you want. Finally, before my last sentence, I just want to say that we didn't try to optimize the radius nor the number of inequations because we were happy with the results. But there is a high probability that there is room for improvement and that it is possible to recover T0 with even fewer signatures. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks, speaker. We have time for questions. We have this weird session that intersects with the meeting of ICR.
Okay.
But, okay.
No,
So just I'm not so familiar with this attacks on dilithium, but like once T0 is recovered, there are realistic time attacks from side channels.
Yes.
Right.
So one can see
these side channels attacks are practical in your view?
yes, completely. Yeah.
Once the T0 is recovered, okay.
Normally, the total public key is T equals A times S1 plus S2. And so S1 is sufficient to forge arbitrary signature. And so most attack against dilithium will try to find S1.
Yeah.
And so you can also find S2 if you know T0. So.
Okay. So, yes, thank you so much. Let's thank all the speakers.